this next story is what grew in Larry's garden. In a sprawling city in a leafy neighborhood on a narrow street in a cozy homes with a tiny yard lived a girl named Grace. Every spare moment she had, Grace helped Larry in his garden. Together, they watered and weeded, planted and pruned, hoed and harvested, and when the bugs burrowed in the carrots and slugs and snails chewed the lettuce, Grace and Larry solved the problem together. "We can figure this out," said Larry. Keeping squirrels away from the tomatoes was a bigger problem. "We can figure this out," said Larry. They built cages out of wire, and the tomato plants could grow inside the wire, but the squirrels couldn't get them. Sometimes fences are handy. When summer ended and autumn came, Grace helped Larry gather and dry seeds to save for next spring. Later that winter, they started growing the tomato seeds in a little cup. There were hundreds of them. Larry, a teacher, took the tomato seedlings to school so his students could look after them. "What will they do with all these plants?" Grace said. "That's the best part. They're not just tomato plants." "What are they?" "Wait and see," said Larry. Winter melted away and spring shouted. One warm afternoon, Grace found Larry on the porch with a pile of paper in his lap. "You wanted to know what my students would do with our plants? Listen to these letters. Dear friend, I'm the kid who used to steal pears from your tree. I'm giving you this tomato plant to say sorry. I live next door to you, but we hardly ever talk. You're the most amazing flower garden. It makes me happy just to see it. I'm giving you this tomato plant to tell you make the world a beautiful place." So they gave the tomatoes to other people. "My students will give these plants away," and they wrote letters to tell why, explained Larry. "Every plant is a gift. A little green tendril reaching out to someone, connecting people." "Now I see," cried Grace. "We were growing a whole lot more than tomatoes." But a shadow fell. One afternoon, Grace went outside and found Larry sitting next among his potatoes. The plants looked wilted, so did Larry, and Grace saw why. The neighbor on the other side had a big panel on top of his fence, blocking the sun on Larry's garden. "So much for my tomatoes," said Larry. All the plants died because they couldn't have any sun. The looming fence made the garden ever smaller than it was, just a tiny patch of earth. Grace looked at the drooping tomato plants and thought about how they spread kindness. She gave Larry a hug. "We'll figure this out." Larry went next door to speak to his neighbor, but they could not agree. "He says the fence makes him feel safe," said Larry. "I guess that makes sense, but I have another idea." "What's that?" "We gotta wait and see." The next morning, when Larry's neighbor stepped outside, the newspaper was on the porch, a small pot, a packet of seeds, and a note. "Dear neighbor, I live 2 doors down from you, and I like to help Larry in his garden. I'm giving you these seeds to say I hope we can all be friends. I think having friends is the best way to feel safe. P.S. I have a plan. Could you meet me outside Saturday morning?" I wonder what they're going to do with their situation. That weekend, Larry heard hammering. He went outside. He found Grace in the yard, working side by side with his neighbor. The high panel on the fence was gone, and so was the shadow. Now they were pounding nails into the fence and tying strings to make kind of a ladder. "Larry, come and see." Larry peered over the fence and saw seed packets. "We're planting beans. They're going to climb the fence." Larry's neighbor looked up from the string, and he was nodding. "I figured we could put the fence to better use." So they're going to be friends now. That afternoon, Larry and Grace and their neighbor sat down together and feasted on fresh lemonade and cherry tomatoes from the Larry's garden, and they were still warm from the sun. And that was what grew in Larry's garden.